Hello, I'm Rob Durham. Today I'm going to give you some advice for when you're offered your first corporate gig.
He tours clubs and colleges all over. He's just published his third book. Give a nice big round of applause for Rob Durham.
First corporate gig I did was a disaster. It was back in probably 2002, 2003, and I was offered $50 to perform at a Christmas party at a computer company at noon in their break room without any equipment. I should have never taken the gig. It was not a fun half hour, and the $50 was not worth it. Part of the problem was I didn't have a solid half hour, especially for a corporate audience. If you're offered something, you don't want to turn it down, but the smart thing to do is find a professional comedian you know and have them come along. If you get offered $400 or $500, split that with them, or even give them a majority of it and have them do most of the heavy lifting. They'll reciprocate that in the future if you get along well. They'll find gigs for you to open for them on other corporate stuff. So yeah, you're going to sacrifice some money for that one gig, but in the long run, it's going to pay out a lot better. If you think you can be the main act at that corporate gig, always bring an opener, no matter what. Please bring an opener. Share at least $50 of that money, preferably more if it's a big payday for you, and find someone that can do 10, 15 minutes, maybe even just 5, just to break the ice and work out the kinks. Otherwise, you're going to have a really cold opening, and it's hard to get them back if you have to do a 45-minute set. So bring an opener. There's a term in the business called corporate clean, and that's referring to these kinds of parties where you don't want to take any risks because the whole thing could go south real quick. You have to be not necessarily squeaky clean with cuss words, but a lot of the material you have to really be careful with. So you always want to research the companies, see what they do. You know, you can tell by the profession if it's a bunch of, blue collar workers versus white collar workers. Obviously you're going to have a lot more leeway with the blue collar audience. Another thing to do is ask, whoever's in charge, what taboo things are there? What topics are off limits? For example, if the CEO of the company just got a DUI last Thursday, you probably don't want to do material about getting DUIs. On the other hand, usually the guy or woman in charge is a pretty good sport as far as you making fun of them. Take a few cracks at them, make sure that's fine ahead of time, but usually they'll take one for the team, and it loosens everyone up. So be careful with that, just ask ahead of time and you should be okay. As you're setting up the details for your show, make sure that they're going to set the room up properly. Remember, they're not a comedy club, so they have no idea about seating, lighting, sound, fix that kind of thing. I once did a gig where I had to perform from the lectern with a microphone there, and it was very uncomfortable, very awkward the entire time. Also, if you're running solo for this, make sure there's someone in the company that can introduce you and knows what you're doing. I always tell this story that one of my first corporate gigs, I was working at back in my hometown in Richland County, Ohio. It was the Cow Rustlers Society. And before they brought me up, they did announcements, and they talked about being careful to, when you vaccinate your cows, you can, this guy talked about he was giving shots to his cows, and one bumped him and he got injected by a needle that he wasn't supposed to, and the guy passed away. And now you're comedian Rob Durham. And that was an incredibly hard hole to dig out of. I couldn't believe it happened. And I was not experienced enough to get out of that hole. So that was a rough 30 minutes as well. I think it was back in 2005. I was working at a club that no longer exists, Joker's in Dayton, with Mike Birbiglia, and he was just a rising star back then. I don't think he was quite on Comedy Central yet, but he was definitely gaining a lot of heat. And we did a 6 p.m. show on a Saturday, and neither of us did well. I was the MC. The feature did very well, and then Mike did not enjoy his set. And I talked to him afterwards, and he goes, some crowds just don't get it. It was a grocery store chain, and it was 2005, so he was taking some shots at George Bush, and they just didn't get it. I think a few of them mumbled out something like, "We're in a red state." So sometimes these gigs are just going to suck. And what happens is a company, a lot of times they all think alike. So if you rub them the wrong way, unfortunately, it just doesn't work out. But That's just how corporates are. There's no comic that just loves to do corporate gigs all the time, although they do pay very well. You should definitely charge as much as you possibly can, because these businesses, they make more money than we could ever dream of as comics. So I'll put a link in this clip for how much to charge. I've got some tips on that as well. But you always want to get the most you can. And sometimes it doesn't go well and you feel bad taking that check, but you get over it once the deposit clears. For more advice on how to make money in stand-up comedy, check out my book, Don't Wear Shorts on Stage. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. And check out my blog, don'twearshortsonstage.com. All kinds of advice in there as well. And be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.